Good evening and welcome to this CASA and Gunner Short webinar on the India-China breakthrough where we're going to discuss military aspects. This is going live to all viewers and subscribers of Clause also. So far, we've been talking of a lot of things about the India-China breakthrough on the LAC and the Z Modi meet. But we're not focused on the military aspects, and that's what we're going to do today. And to talk us through all this for the next hour or so, I have a very competent panel. So first, let me welcome all of them. Yeah,
Thank you.
there comes General Pannu. So we have General Gautam Murthy, General Rakesh Sharma, who commanded 14 Corps, which on the LAC, General Dushyant, who was in the Eastern Command, so he's going to cover the Eastern Command aspects, and General Pannu, who will give an overview. Though he's also commanded the same corps as General Rakesh, I request General Pannu to give the overview so that there's no overlap of opinion. Right. Uh, I'll not give many opening remarks and all that because we've been going through this for the past 1 week. I'll straight away request General Gautam Murthy, sir, please tee off.
Good evening, General Shankar. Good evening, my fellow panelists. Good evening, viewers. Jai Hind to all of you. As you said, we are focusing strictly on military aspects. There's no doubt that this breakthrough that has taken place in Russia is a long drawn out process in all domains. Let us not forget what came about. How did it come about? It took 4.5 years of intense and extensive negotiations. It involved 31 rounds of diplomatic talks through the WMCC, that is the Working Mechanism for Consultation and Coordination on India-China Border Affairs. It included 21 rounds of military talks at the Corps Commander level. So apart from our External Affairs Minister and the Chinese Foreign Minister meeting every time, our Foreign Minister our External Affairs Minister kept emphasizing the urgency of resolving outstanding issues along the line of actual control. The culmination of these efforts reflects a concerted push from both sides to stabilize our relationship. And why did this happen? Chinese deployments in eastern Ladakh in April 2020, heightened tensions. So, at the very least, what we can say today is that the downward spiral has been halted. Militarily, the agreement to reduce the troop presence at these disputed border points, it represents a very significant step towards de-escalation. Whether there'll be new buffer zones where both sides will withdraw their troops to prevent future conflicts, like what happened in Galwan, will be spoken about by my eminent co-panelists. But all I'll say is that India must continue to enhance its military capabilities in response to China's increasing military power. And when I say military capabilities, it's not only the Indian Army, but the Navy and the Air Force. Just 2 days ago, as far as what has actually happened is concerned, is that it has been reported that the PLS completely dismantled the temporary structures and pulled back to the pre-April 2020 positions. Patrolling is being conducted in Demchok as hitherto and is likely to resume in Depsang shortly. And the patrols will have, what was given to understand, will have full unrestricted access to the 5 patrolling points that were denied in Depsang and the 2 in Dimchok. And in fact, what is even more important is that the patrols will be able to go up to the Chardingla Pass, which that means it's so important for our locals that our herders will also be able to go up there and take their yaks and their animals, their goats up to that place. Now, I've got 3 excellent co-panelists with me who are on-ground people. I'm just telling you the general area and what I've got from the media. But I will never tire of repeating one old adage, which is actually a Russian proverb, but made famous by President Ronald Reagan, which says, trust but verify. We all are aware that the clash at Galwan happened because our troops went to a particular spot to see if the PLA had taken down the structures that they had put up earlier. Now they had not. So what happened? There was a verbal admonition by the commanding officer, and he told the PLA guys. They got incensed. Then apparently, I mean, from what one gathered, they hit the commanding officer, which incensed our troops. They came back with reinforcements. There was a clash. Now, this kind of situation we must avoid going forward. Cool head should prevail and progress not only in the boundary issue but in other domains. And basically, there are three stages to this process in within the military. The first stage is disengagement. This is what is going on. Then will be de-escalation and then de-induction. As an ordnance man, all I'll tell you is that the winter is already setting in, and our troops deployed there are well equipped and housed. I want to make your the audience understand this very clearly. Stocks of food, clothing, equipment, fuel, ammunition, stores, everything would have been made up to the maximum quantities or numbers authorized as per our advanced winter stocking schedules. So while the entire process may take time, the troops there would not be short of any essential commodity. I want to stress upon this. That said, the de-induction will always be taking the same pace as the Chinese de-induction. In fact, if you recall our deployments when we realized that the Chinese had come in and it was a lockdown time, COVID had hit all over. Our deployments mirror the Chinese deployments. So similarly, I think our de-induction will mirror the Chinese de-inductions. But just to assure the audience and everyone else, I can confidently say our troops are well equipped to last through the winter there, should the need arise that they continue to be in those places and step back gradually. Thank you, General Shankar. Back to you.
Thanks a lot, sir. Thanks for your opening remarks. I think you made some very important points. But what I'd like to highlight is that while there are some details, the full details are not available to all of us. What's happening on
Yes,
ground? That
yes,
we must bear in mind. Secondly, we also have to understand this is not a deal or an agreement or a pact. It is largely nothing is written. We don't know what's written on in paper between the two governments or the two militaries. Whatever it is largely a matter of understanding. That's what the impression, at least I get, we don't have. The third point which I'd like to highlight is whatever happens on the LAC, whether it's disengagement, whether it's de-induction or de-escalation or whatever you call it, will set the tone for the China-India relations in the future. And that is why
yes.
we're concentrating on this. And the most talked about sector is the Demchok Daksang Eastern Ladakh sector. So we'll start there. General Rakesh Sharma, sir, all yours. Please focus on Eastern Ladakh. And if you can cover the central sector also, we'll be grateful. Thank you. All yours, sir.
Okay, thank you for inviting me. Very interesting uh, panel, and there are great people sitting here, and I'm in the awe already of good friends around here. I just make few points. Please allow me. I absolutely agree with what General Shankar said. The fine print is not available. We do not know exactly what has happened, and let's not venture into issues and make commitments to the audience which we do not know about today. One commitment which I wish to make is that there is no talk at all of Chardingla. Let's not talk word Chardingla at all. The media doesn't know, and the media and I personally do not know myself, but I think if they allow us to Chardingla, that will be going back on legacy issue. I go back to 2007, 2008 when I was BJ Sops there. Even those days, Chardingla was a very difficult patrol to take, and there were major problems. And I do not know what agreement has been arrived at Chardingla. We know about what's happened in Demsag, but nobody has spoken officially about what has happened in the area of Demchok, except that these two habitats that were created, the encampments, Changa, whatever the Champa camp, which was created near on the Demchok Nala, has been dismantled, and some patrolling is permitted. Where to, we do not. So let's not venture into that issue at all. Second, the issue I wish to raise is that WMCC has had 31 meetings from the time WMCC was raised. which was in 2013, not from 2020. 20 meetings of WMCC had happened between 2013 and 2020. Only 11 meetings have happened after 2020, and 21 meetings of the corps commanders have taken place. So while we say 31 meetings, of WMCC, it is not exactly that it has happened like that. WMCC meetings were continuing even prior to what happened in 2020. Third issue. Uh, while patrolling has commenced in the area of Depsang, and we do learn uh, authoritatively that some patrols have already taken place. Maybe helicopter recce's, as General Pannu would have gone, I must have gone number of times across to PP-13, landed there and come back. So we know the first round of things would have been taken up by aerial ways to find out whether the establishments habitat that has been established across and the patrolling routes between Y junction to 9 and Y junction to 13, and as they combine together, all these intermediate things have been dismantled. I'm sure they would have been dismantled. We would have done the same thing on own side of bottleneck. So that is the third point which I wish to make, that the first patrolling has taken place. Some media reports say they've gone to 11, but let's deem it that this is a long patrol, establishes a patrol base, it goes to two directions. So it's a difficult procedure to do it. How much has been done, one doesn't know, but something has begun. Fourth point I want to raise is that presently we do not know what we have permitted quid pro quo to the Chinese. We are all talking about ourselves as to what we have achieved, but undoubtedly we have permitted Chinese also many things. How far they come there now? We get a first toehold into Depsang Plateau after this patrolling starts off. The all other access route to Depsang Plateau, which we used to patrol earlier, are now in buffer zone. So there is an issue there. But we have now a foothold, at least a peek into the Depsang Plateau in this area that we're going to patrol here. But what will the Chinese do? Will Chinese send to Burse? It's been spoken Chinese will send a patrol to Burse, which they used to send often, and there used to be scuffles or clashes when that patrol used to come down to Burse. I'm also anxious whether the Chinese will like to send a patrol to Barahoti, to Mana, Malari, Niti, and Shipkela passes. Have they asked something from the central sector? There are non-corroborated items that we have permitted patrolling to Yangtze or Asfila or one of these places in the east. How are we permitting them to come to Rakula in Sikkim? Where is the quid pro quo so that fine print is not available? And how are we going to monitor these patrols? I'm sure there is a scheduling thing carried out. Okay, you do patrolling tomorrow, I do it day after tomorrow, or whatever this kind of schedules would have been come through. And that frequency would have been worked out, the number of people, the weapons to be carried, all this would have been worked out at the tactical level down from core below, and duly approved at the right levels. But how will we manage a patrol that comes down to, say, Burse, I'm just saying, for example, because it comes down very close to the road that connects between the area of say the road that comes off from Shok village, and it's driving up to DBO. As you drive out DBO, you cross Burse post. So does it imply that the Chinese patrol will come down to the road that we have built across there? And are we going to escort such patrols? Are we going to escort patrols that come to Asfila or to Yangtze or wherever? So those are fine prints. One doesn't know. I'm sure at the tactical level things will be resolved here. The fifth point I want to make is that the infrastructure largely created outside the realms of the line of actual control. Firstly, line of actual control. We have patrolling points in the east. We have the issue of the, as you're aware, the McMahon line, or whatever they call it.
McMahon, yeah. जो भी है,
Mahon.
it's okay.
Spelled himself rightly. Why did he spell himself wrongly? Okay, leave McMahon alone.
वो मोहन हो जाता तो अच्छा होता.
मोहन अच्छी होता, हमको pronunciation में आसानी रहता. So that apart. Now the issue which I'm raising is that there is a line that we deem a line. We always kept talking all these years about perceptions of the Chinese line. Chinese have not told us their line till date. I mean, they say 1959 line. 1959 line has no locus standi, no rationale, no legality, no thought process, no historicity. There is no basis of a 1959 line which comes on the base of, say, the hills of in Eastern Ladakh. So now the fact of the matter is, somebody has to say, you tell us your line, yeah. You know our line. You know 1 to 65 petrol points. Now it's common knowledge. Every drawing room knows in India, which is 1 to 55, 65 points. But we do not know the Chinese line. We talk about perception. Till when will we keep talking perceptions? Sometime there should be a step forward to say, okay, no perception. We talk a line. Issue I was raising is about infrastructure. Now, G695, the road which is come now of, and Shankar has also discussed once earlier about those bridges being made across in Pegongso Lake also, those big bridges which have come up across there, switching of forces. Now, that's all part of G695. They're building starting from Shaidullah right up to Arunachal Pradesh till Wilong, which is about 10 to 15 kilometers from what we deem it as our line of actual control. And also, the runways have been increased to 5 kilometers, including Shigatse, including Garigunza. All these runways have been included. There have been blast pens made. There are underground structures made. There are cantonments which have come up in Rudok and many other places. Large cantonments have come up. The fiber optic cable, the oil pipelines, and the retention of the forces there. So where is it that, other than these two places that we have disengagement, where is it that there is a relaxation carried out for our troops to take a step back and say, okay, we can relax? I'll end, General Shankar, you must allow me. घर में कोई सुनता नहीं है, यहीं पे बोल सकते हैं हम. Now,
Go ahead, sir.
The issue I wish to raise, and I get worked up, is the issue of trust. Now, look, we trusted the Chinese often in our lives. We trusted the Chinese for 20 years, from 1993 to 2013, when he first time came and occupied an area for 22 days. Then he came and did, when Huda was army commander, the areas of Chumar, when 5-6 battalion or units had to move across there in those areas. Then it happened in Doklam, and all these things been happening. We gave our trust to the Chinese. Now units have drones. I understand drones are flying across. We are able to see Chinese drones are flying on our own side. We have a much better battlefield transparency that we used to have earlier. We also understand that there is a thought process which started with the economic survey, which said that the FDI, we should invite FDI into Chinese, from Chinese to India, then the trade must increase, and it's a win-win situation for India and China in case economic activity interaction increases. Separate thing. We must do what we must do on the border: shake hands, exchange gifts, exchange some medicines, give them some sweets whenever do, play basketball, may take a two mouthai or two. But trust, I don't think we should venture into trust. Even establishment of trust, I don't think so. That trust and verify was suitable for Reagan and Gorbachev in timing for dealing with nuclear issues, where they said, okay, dismantling of nuclear weapons, that ABM treaties and the SALT talks and all that, you could do it. But here, there is an issue of sovereignty. Chinese call it not territorial integrity. They talk about sovereignty. All good relations apart, I think we should not venture into the trust for quite some time before this. We should not enter into situations that can get problematic again, and there will be problems. I'll rest here, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot. Very good points.
General Shankar, 1 second. Just one clarification I want to make, since about what General Rakesh Sharma said. You see, I have got my issues updated only through open source and media. I want to clarify, I have no source anywhere else. Now, about charting law, this is an article of the Times of India of 2nd November, which says that the Indian Army is able to uh, go and patrol and would be able to patrol there, and including grazing that will occur. So it was a Times of India report that I am using and nothing else. I just wanted to
Okay,
make that
I,
fine.
I,
No,
clear.
no.
Thank you.
Shankar, I not rebutted. I'm just
Yeah.
saying
Thank you.
Chardingla was a pass, a patrol, which actually required the efforts of the complete unit to do so. It's a very tough mountaineering patrol, and the grazing ground was largely in Demchok Nala up to
Yeah.
CNN Junction. They were also not venturing forward towards Chardingla. I read the reports. I've seen the articles being written about Chardingla. I would, and I know what used to happen when Chardingla patrols were being
Absolutely.
planned earlier, even at years when I was BJ Soft's Northern Command. And I will not venture to guess that the Chinese have permitted us to come to Chardingla till the time the official establishment says so, sir. I will not believe the media
Absolutely,
reports of
Yeah,
the
absolutely.
Chinese.
I
I go
completely
with,
agree. I defer to your experience and
yeah, let's
knowledge
go ahead,
and,
sir.
and hands-on experience there. There is no doubt
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah,
Thank
let me recount the major issues which General Sharma has brought out. I think the very relevant stuff. Chadingla, big question mark, right? Because whether Chinese have allowed it or not, because I heard also that they have not allowed that, so I'll leave it at that. So it's a question mark. We leave it as a question mark. The issue of quid pro quo, very, very important. So where have we given what the Chinese want, and what did the Chinese want? And what about the buffer zones? What's the future of the buffer zones? And that's something which right?
Yeah.
I'd like General Pannu in your overall thing. You might like to address that. Then the issue of a word was used of escorted patrols. So what's the protocol for these escorted patrols? They're complicated things because we've not had this earlier. We've not had this earlier at all. Then we speak of schedules and protocols on the how to handle the LAC and all that. All these we've always had, but over a period of time they degenerate. How do you handle this in the long run is the challenge, and for that you need trust, which you don't have. And we are very clear on this. We can't trust them as much as we don't trust them. They also don't trust us. That's the next point. And in case the Chinese don't trust anyone, so let's be very clear about it. They don't trust anyone, and we are in for a tough time, whether you like it or not. I mean, whether we like it or not, we should prepare for that. Okay. Now, another important thing is we all talk of perception of LAC. What's the Chinese perception of LAC? We don't know, right? And we just don't know. And that 1959 line depends on not only who's thought of it on the ground, which book you see, what you see. That perception also changes by every page you turn. So it's a whole nebulous thing. We need to go step by step. We shouldn't get too excited about the whole affair. And whatever happens on the LAC is going to affect everything else. That's the important thing. And the major issue, the LAC has become formidable in depth. So we could do a bit of disengagement. I don't know whether we'll be able to do de-escalation. That's far away. That's my own view. And the issue of trust, I've spoken, and trade and all that. I don't think trade also is very far away. Because if you read Chinese literature, especially in media like Guancha.cn and all that, they're very clear they don't want to do any trade at this point of time. Right? At this point of time, they also are saying, look, first get the whole thing do. And they are looking at the whole issue geopolitically. But having said this, let's look at what's in store in the eastern sector and what are the perceptions in the eastern sector. Jal Dushyant, all yours.
Thank you, sir, and thank you, and very good evening to the panelists, sir. And What I can say is that, simply put, Eastern, as far as the Eastern sector is concerned, that was more as a precautionary measure. Everything went forward. Reorientation had taken place, reorganization of formations had taken place. Those issues are not there in the agreement. So, till how long our troops would be there in that area, basically what we have been talking about, disengagement, etc. That is something which we still need to wait and watch as to what has exactly happened. In my view, I don't think anything on those issues has really been worked out. What I can say about Eastern is that there are 14 Eastern and Central combined. There are about 14 points where our patrols normally have been either clashing or reaching out to meet out the PLA patrols. Starting from the east, if you take certain sensitive areas of the RALP, which is the rest of the Arunachal Pradesh area, there are those 5 valleys. In those 5 valleys, more importantly, the fish tail areas. That was where we used to have PLA patrols coming inside our territory, and we would normally react to it based on certain intelligence and inputs which we used to get. I believe the surveillance and intelligence inputs have improved, but not to the extent as compared to the Chinese. If you see the kind of intelligence that the Chinese enjoy in this particular area, basically because of their space and other technological asymmetry which they have, we are still reacting to any such kind of patrols in the past. I don't think anything has been worked out on those in that area. Similarly, we have the Maza Bisa area and the lower Subansiri area. There also we had very long distances to travel to meet or meet up with these Chinese patrols, which used to come across the LAC as per our perception. One interesting thing which I would like to tell as regards patrolling is concerned, in the eastern sector, we have never ever crossed over the LAC as far as our perception is concerned, the watershed. Whereas in the case of the PLA, they have been crossing at number of places which are now termed as disputed areas. So these out of these 14, I think two are important for us. We don't know how far the agreement would affect this particular area, that is Fishtail 2, and in the lower Subanshri area, where we have to travel a lot. Still, infrastructure still needs a kind of additional development. Roads have to go forward. As far as your the Tawang area is concerned, uh, Chinese are somehow fixated with Yangtze, and that is one area I would feel that in the future could become a major trouble spot. So I think there also there would be some kind of friction taking place as to how we are going to deal with the incursions with the Chinese continue to have, and that generally they come in large numbers. These patrols are more a show of force, 200 people, 300 PLA soldiers coming across to that Yangtze Nala, and then we reacting to it and trying to push them back. It has happened after Galwan also, if you all remember, 2022,
22,
Yangtze.
October 22.
Yeah, October 22 when Yangtze. So even now, what I have gathered is that the Chinese are really, really sensitive to the Yangtze area. So that is one flashpoint which we need to watch out as to what arrangements have been done at that particular place. Other than that, I don't think in the Tamang sector there is any major issue which would come up, as per my opinion. If you go to the Sikkim area, there again the area of Dolam, which we nowadays call as Doklam, Dolam area is where the Chinese patrols used to come right up to Jamferi. So that is one place where we have to keep a very close watch. We are not sure whether they have resumed or we have allowed them to do patrolling up to that. In any case, that area is not part of us. It's Bhutanese territory. So therefore, what is happening to those patrols? At least I am not very clear about it. Nothing has been said in the open source, so I really can't commit whether it is business as usual. That means the patrols, the way they were coming in the past, are they going as per that? One is not very sure. Although Torsa Nala, which is ahead of the Zamferi Ridge, is considered by and large as you can say as the line where beyond which we start reacting. That is, even from the Indian side, we start raising the Bhutanese people to not allow these people to come across, but they have built roads around this area to go further into the Chumbi Valley. As far as Nakula and Muguthang is concerned, these are the other two flashpoints. Nakula is on the plateau, and so these areas, I don't think there is any major issue, and it's more of a uh, I would say a very routine kind of a thing. It was in fact Nakula was actually sorry, the plateau was actually a flag flag meeting point, in fact, although it has been stopped for quite some time nowadays there are no flag meetings taking place except for Nathula, which remain as such. In fact, we'll also have to check out as to whether the flag meetings are taking place along the eastern command sector or not. I don't think anything of that nature has taken place for quite some time. If you look at then the central sector also similar situation is there. Patrolling issues have not come across. So my opinion is that as far as eastern and the central sector is concerned, it is about disengagements of the additional troops which have been deployed there. And as far as the reorientation of forces are concerned, that will continue. I don't think we are going to let down on the various reorganizations which we have done of the forces overlooking this particular sector from central right up to the eastern sector, that is from Chumar right up to the tri junction of India, China, Myanmar. In this particular sector, whatever additional deployments which we have done, reorientation which we have done, either in the depth or immediate depth or in the reserve areas, that is going to continue unless and until we have some kind of a very, I would say. But nowadays you can't even trust any agreement. The way these people are breaking agreements which we have been having in the past. My sense is that the deployments are going to stay. Only thing which might happen is that there would be some amount of disengagements taking place, probably going back to the pre 2020 time frame of having the quantum of people deployed in the forward areas. As far as these sectors are concerned, one third is what is normally accepted by norms, that one third of the troops would be there in the border areas and rest of them remain in their permanent locations and move up during the operative time to build up the situation. So eastern and central, to my mind, are going to be postured only, remain postured. The flashpoints which are there, Chumar is another one where we might have some kind of a detailed coordination on ground for patrolling. This concept of escorted patrols, coordinated patrols, did not exist in eastern sector at all. This was not there. I mean, the PLA would come on their own. We would go on our own. We would obliterate their signs, etc., which they used to leave behind, and likewise they would obliterate our signs, whichever we left behind, as far as indicating that to be our territory, except in certain areas like Bisa area, etc., where there is some amount of clashes which take place. So, from the eastern sector, my sense is the deployments which additional agreement increments which have been done, they will continue to stay. Patrolling would possibly resume to the pre 2020 era, because there were really no major flashpoints except what I told you about the Zamferi area, Fishtail area, the
And Yangtze.
Yangtze area. These are, and Chumar, of course, because Chumar earlier was part of the part of the northern sector, but now it has come as part of the central. So central is now actually Chumar up to the that is Nepal border. So that is the only change. In my view, it will be a precautionary deployment continued unless we have some very concrete agreements on disengagements and
Right.
de-escalation and disengagements.
Okay. Thanks a lot, General Dushyant. I think you covered a lot of ground. The points which I would like to highlight is that, look, the level of disagreement in the eastern sector is not as much as in the northern sector or the western sector or eastern Ladakh, but they are there. Important, Fishtail. Fishtail is a place where we are very severely hampered by our inability to reach in time because of road conditions and the soil conditions. The soil conditions there are so poor that even a 1 ton going over to a 2 ton going over tracks, marginal tracks, can collapse. It's a soft soil. Whereas on the other side, things are slightly better, especially because they have a road which rings the ridge around the fishtails. That, I mean, I'm talking of my personal experience there. Then, of course, Yangtze. Yangtze is a very critical point, like what General Dushyant said. We'll have to see, because there's certain unauthenticated versions of things coming out. But what is the fine print? What is the actual thing we need to know? And hopefully, in due course, something will clearly emerge. But we need to take care of it. Then the issue of Sikkim. What I'd like to highlight about Sikkim and the LAC, Sikkim is really not an LAC. It's actually a delineated border. That border was delineated between
Correct.
Sikkim and Tibet long back. Okay,
Yes.
much before we even Sikkim became independent. Joined with India, right? And we recognize before we recognize Tibet as part of China. So it's almost a delineated border. There's no scope of their incursion there. If they're incursioning against the international border, right? That's what I want to make. Of course, the issue of Doklam will continue, and we'll talk of it in the next this thing. So with this, thanks a lot.
I
Important
would like
issues
to
brought out.
I would like
Yeah.
to add one more point here. When we look at the eastern sector, we must not forget the dispute with Bhutan, because now what
Yeah,
has happened.
I'll come to that. No, I'm coming to that. I'll ask you this question.
Yeah, yeah.
I'll ask you this question. This is the question which I have for your next round. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Thanks a lot. General Pannu, all yours. Please give an overview as to what the whole story you heard your own core, what General Rakesh had said, and then what General Dushyant. Please give us an overview about the whole affair. All yours.
Thank you, General Shankar and General Moorthy. It was great listening to General Sharma and my friend Dushyant. India and China have a very special relationship which cannot be understood either by the world or, I think, by India and by China both. So, our entire understanding is that it appears that there is a strategic necessity for the China to keep the boundary disputed. And they want to keep it disputed basically to contain India uh, to the Asian region rather than trying to or making an attempt to become a global player. So, whatever the Chinese do, they want to build peace at will and bring aggression at will. So, I think whatever the Chinese do, they do how they want to do when they want to do. Now, going back to the two uh, lines of history which you can divide actually before 1962, how the Chinese walked into Tibet and the British had already marked a few lines and they did not give a line to India. So therefore, Indians drew a line which was along the maximum line, which was the Johnson line, and we said entire excitement belongs to India. In 1955, of course, the Western Highway was built, and it was discovered that they had built a highway. While the highway and our claim to the entire excitation became a very big political embarrassment to India because that whatever you think is India is not India, and the Chinese have already come into it. On the other side, of course, was the POK. So therefore, the status of J&K on one side disputed and claimed by Pakistan. I think there is a historical fault line there that none of these were given to India as the international border, and we marked it on our own. And there was no understanding between India, stroke Tibet, or India, stroke China as to where the boundaries would lie. And therefore, I think right from day one, the push and pull strategy, the perception creation and misperception creation, but I think constantly at play. And of course, in 1959, we all know that Dalai Lama came to India, and we have been keeping Dalai Lama much to the dislike of the Chinese. And he's a religious head. He's also a political head because they established a government in exile here, much to the dislike of the Chinese. So then, of course, came 1962. In 1962, of course, we know what happened, but also we know that the Chinese went back on their own. So it means one thing to be noted is that the Chinese came on their own. They did whatever they had to do. We fought the way we wanted to fight, or we could fight, or wherever we could push ourselves into it. But they fell back on their own. They did not, there was no understanding that, hey, we will be having a ceasefire and there's no meeting, nothing of that sort. On their own, they decided to go back. They left entire Arunachal Pradesh, wherever they were there, mostly in the Tamang Bomdila sector. And of course, they left eastern Ladakh and went back. And on their own, they decided that they will create a buffer of 20 kilometers from where the last troops were. And they wanted Indians also to go back, which we adhered to. So 20 kilometers that side and 20 kilometers this side became a demilitarized zone. primarily as the Chinese wanted. After that, there were no Chinese seen in Tibet on the LAC, McMahon line, or the settled boundary in Sikkim, whatever you have, except in 1975, they had a clash in Talungla. Then what happened was that in 80s, when we adopted a forward posture in Arunachal Pradesh, when Nefa became Arunachal Pradesh, we started building defenses there. And the Chinese walked into Somdrongchu in 1985-86, and they never went back. Whatever we try to do or not, that is another matter altogether. But the fact of the matter is that the Chinese are there in Somdrongchu today, and we have accepted them the way it is, and then we have adjusted our patrolling points accordingly, how it is. Then came 1999, when we fought Kargil War. Very quickly, Chinese started building roads into eastern Ladakh. They made road right up to north of Pagongso, up to Finger Four. And the attempts were to make it even beyond Finger Four. So they started doing patrolling up to Finger Four and beyond. That is in the eastern Ladakh, north of Pagongso. And that entire area, our claim up to Finger 8, their claim up to Finger 4, became in principle an understanding of their perception and our perception, because every time there was a border post meeting, or they would communicate that this is where we would want to go. So wherever tactically or during the border meetings, whatever the Chinese have expressed, that became their perception, not that it was done at the highest political or at the diplomatic level, none of that sort. So therefore, even Yangtze started becoming a focus of attention, because they had also built a road right opposite Yangtze, and we built a wall. Once we built a wall, that is what they did not like, and they would want that this line should not remain the way the Indians built it. And they continuously have been coming and trying to break that wall, because they don't want a line which India can draw and be seen as a perception. Yangtze, of course, has not been very well known, but the Chinese have, by and large, come to Yangtze twice in a year. And none of this ever gets reported. And whenever it gets reported, it seems that now the Chinese have come there. But the Chinese have been coming there because there are holy waters right below Yangtze. And the Tibetan also worship that area. They want to come and sit on top of it. But more important is that from Yangtze, we can have a deeper look towards Tawang. And that is where the Chinese are very upset about not wanting India to have any point where we can have a look into their territory, or even dominate their territory, or even sit on the passes which we can block or dominate beyond the line which they demarcate is their line of interest. I'm not talking about the line of perception, the line of interest. So they continuously keep pushing us there. So based on that, the lines they crossed, there was in 2013, 2014, when we talk about, coming into Burse, coming into, south of it, and Debsang, they came in. So in 2013 through 2014 and 2015, these lines were crossed at will by the Chinese. And also what they did was in 2017, on their own, they started going into the Dolam area. They went right up to Torsa and started building their infrastructure beyond it. Obviously, we know that there is a sensitivity in that area, and the Chumbi Valley and our thin lines of communication that we are very sensitive to is the one that they've been wanting to really come and hit. The fact of the matter here is that when we're talking about Dolam, the dispute is between the Bhutanese and the Chinese, which they have more or less settled. We do not know how much is settled or not, but it seems apparently that all that matter between the Bhutanese and the Chinese have already been settled in principle, or how they conduct their patrol is completely in conformity and understanding of the Bhutanese. But I think largely it is not being made a noise of much. Then, of course, we go into Wuhan spirit. That in Wuhan spirit, we started talking about that, hey, listen, we have to do more, understanding with each other. We have to depend on each other. We are the neighbors and all that, right? The punch shield language keeps getting repeated off and on. So when I was talking about after 1962 war, that they hit us in 75 and 86, then very quickly the number of agreements came. The BPTA, that is the Peace and Tranquility Agreement 1993, the Confidence Building Measures in 1996, the Defense Cooperation Agreement in 2013, after they had actually come to Depsang. And 2005 was also the guiding principles on how to settle the boundary question. Now, if you really look at these guiding principles, it is how their nation feels their interest should be looked after is based on which they would settle the boundary dispute. But as I said, that it seems that Islami slicing or not settling the border is a strategy of the Chinese. So why would they tell you what their perception is? Because the moment they tell what the perception is, then we would align ourselves to it, that this is what you're saying, now you're saying something different. They don't want to say anything, and therefore you cannot contest on any line that they're talking about. They don't want to talk about it. So therefore, whatever is happening is also linked to the dispute between the two nations in the JNK of POK, and also JNK or Ladakh region, which we talk about is on the mirroring excitation both sides. And the CIPIC is one big interest of theirs, where they don't want anything to happen where India could posture itself and have any ability to interfere in their CPEC or any trade in these areas. So they want to limit us, not only limit us, keep us embarrassed and keep us guessing exactly what we are looking at. The current situation in the India-China relationship or on the border is very different than what we've had earlier. I think we have to look at the larger global scenario which is unfolding today. Very quickly, on 21st October, if there is a deal which has happened, uh, on the face of it, they've been talking about, okay, once the two leaders meet in Kazan in BRICS, so they must be more conducive with one another, and therefore they agreed to withdraw and have some agreement on disengagement and have a protocol on patrolling. But really speaking, the Chinese never put out any details. The details were being put out by us, but not by the Chinese. Uh, Absolutely in keeping with their three warfare strategies that uh, keep claiming, keep pushing, and if there is any reaction by India, then you start counter-attacking, and that is their offensive is a counter-attack and not an offensive. So put the entire blame on India for whatever the situation gets created on the border. So therefore, when we are talking about India now showing up globally as a player which can go and handle disputes between Russia and Ukraine, we can also look at what is happening in the Gulf region. Um, we largely, when you look at, look east and look west, we are looking west and east both, and trying to balance the whole world. I think the Chinese have constantly been trying to remind us that you please stay where you belong, that is the subcontinent, and do not try to jump across into larger issues and have a quad kind of an understanding, because quad really means that you are against the Chinese. And fact of the matter is that yes, quad came up, and it was a pushback from the Chinese, which largely made India to talk about quad in more favorable terms, as that we are all understanding. India also sits in the SEO. And what is important is that the way Israel and Iran are now locked into a war, which is not a war of today, but I think it could be a war of the future. I think the dispute or the war is now closing on to very close to India. While the India, Pakistan, China, three nuclear states will not go to war of that kind, but I think there will be disputes which they will not allow us to settle down, because they do not want the Indian military to be powerful as far as the oceans are concerned. So therefore, one of the reasons is to keep us committed on the land borders, and do not allow the Indian Navy to go into areas which is the weakness of China. And China, in any case, I think on the Makran coast and also in the Bay of Bengal. Bay of Bengal is no more the Indian lake. The Chinese have built infrastructure for the Navy and even for the submarines to come in. I think the infrastructure on the Makran coast in Gwadar, the way the Chinese have built infrastructure for the Chinese submarines to be berthed there all the time. So therefore, the Chinese survey ships moving around in the Indian Ocean is basically to know how the Chinese submarines, which are ultimately, according to their plan, would be located in the Bay of Bengal and in the Makran coast, how would they dominate the Indian Ocean? And if this is how the Chinese are trying to get the survey ships to give the routes to the uh, both Pakistan, the PLA Navy, to cooperate in this region, I think, is basically to make sure that there is no more, as they call it, dilemma, which is getting stuck in any of the bottlenecks. So therefore, the Chinese want to show their presence in the entire Indian Ocean, and they have built the bases all along Djibouti onwards, Maldives, of course, and then coming down to Sri Lanka and down to areas Myanmar and Bangladesh, of course, that we're talking about. Now, what has happened is that now that they have gone for another agreement of disengagement, the Chinese are much more prepared than they were ever before because they have built the infrastructure there. Their military is now trained for about 4 years. That not only they have built infrastructure, I think they have put the personnel on ground. They have collected the data as to on the behavior of the Indian troops. India, on the other side, we've been talking about decoupling, and then we started talking about de-risking. Of course, all this will continue to happen because somewhere or the other, dependency on trade globally will remain, and more so when we're talking about the artificial intelligence, the chip making not available to India, and we are talking about the cyber and the space, which are the next domains of warfare, where we are not going to have the supply chain which is going to be comfortable for Indians to operate without any problems. So therefore, even in the multi-domain operations, the new dimensions added in the cyber and space, I think, are creating huge amount of challenge. Therefore, China has not only modernized, and China has not only have had their experience in last 4 years, they have also built the defense industrial complex there, and their military and their equipment is not tested. And I'm sure they are looking for some way or the other to test the military equipment somewhere or the other, whether this side or go towards Taiwan is something that I think they have to see. But
We'll
in
see
last
that, sir.
4 years, the number of exercises that they've conducted towards Taiwan are also noteworthy. So, are they trying to pull the Americans into a binary kind of a stretch? Or are they trying to hook India out of the US fold or the Western fold is something that needs to be seen. And therefore, what we were talking about trust deficit, I think unless we prepare for war, unless we have our land borders and also our navy strong enough to counter the Chinese, we are going to be kept in a state where neither can we talk about trust or no trust. But I think we are going to be kept in the state of ambiguity by design by the Chinese. So therefore, I think all is not well. It is momentarily what the Chinese want to
Yeah.
show us. They're showing us no now.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, General Pannu. I think you made some very, very interesting points and relevant points. If I may recollect or recap the important issues, you said China will keep the boundary disputed. They'll resort to peace at will and aggression at will. It's something like the old thing that they'll use this as a pressure point, or the LAC as a pressure point to make us behave. But well, I have my own view on this. I think that time has passed. Right. The issue, interesting thing which you brought out as far as the LAC is concerned is after 62, they went back on their own. If you look at it psychologically or whichever way you look at it, they actually respected that McMahon line. Barring a few places, they've generally respected that McMahon line. It's something which many of us, in our thing, don't get to look at it. Yangtze, they come twice a year. I go with you completely. Yangtze gives them a look into the Tawang Bowl. And they will make a thing. That's why I said we don't know what's the outcome at Yangtze. We'll see. And China will never tell us about their perception of the line, because once you have a perception of their line, that line gets frozen, and you can bargain around that line. And the line, if it is not there, then you can keep shifting it the way they want. An important point which you made of the LAC dynamics, and the LAC dynamics will continue the way they are, because as long as we are involved in the LAC and guarding the LAC without peace, right? Then till then the CPC can go on, and the CPEC is having problems. It's not easy, right? I mean, every word of that C, P, E, and C are having problems in that whole story. And so if that has to go through to some degree of end game for that, they have to keep India away from it. Because if this LAC is settled by any stretch of imagination, the next target India will have is the CPEC, and they know it. Okay, and then so the salami slicing will go on, and the fact is that we have to keep ourselves prepared. Right, we've gone through this, and now I'll request your views on a few issues which you have brought up. First, I'll go to General Rakesh Sharma. Sir, we did talk about, today we're talking of disengagement. And, from what you said, they have built up Ladakh into a cantonment, extended runways, they built blast pens, underground shelters, brought their missiles up, all that. And, they've done a lot. So, in this kind of a context, is there a case that we should stop talking of this de-escalation? I don't think it didn't happen at all. I mean, if you have de-induction to some extent, maybe some certified de-induction is all what we can hope for. And I don't see de-escalation happening. Your views on this?
So, Jan Shankar, I am not very sure if the next steps after this have been discussed at this stage, because all this while, all the discussions that have taken place at the Corps Commanders level and the WMCC and the meetings of the External Affairs Minister, Mr. Wangi, have brought us to this fair of getting across to sort out the issues of Demchok and Depsang. So, what next is a hazy moment as yet. And de-escalation, de-induction sound very nice. I don't know whether we can venture and think about it in near future. We have to resolve many other issues, as rightly pointed out. We haven't spoken about buffers as yet. The buffer zones is a large area which has been buffered. And buffer word is, of course, a colloquial, but it was temporary moratorium on patrolling. What about how long will this temporary moratorium of patrolling remain to the areas that we were patrolling earlier, to Kurang Nala or to Konkala Pass or many other areas, with Finger 8, as also to Razangla, Rechengla, Gurungil, Magaril, all those issues which are still pending. So, their next steps would be these steps which are important, which will need to be resolved. You can't have buffers which can be infringed. Off and on, the media comes up with some report. See, media picks up snippets from so-called sources. I get amazed at who are the sources, and the media picks up some establishment. Some establishment has come up in one of the buffer zones. A new report said. Now, how do you come to know unless you get a satellite imagery? You prove it that this is a buffer zone. These are all causing more and more confusion into the whole thing. And we need to take a step back. Let the people, negotiators who are negotiating, to find out, sort out the issues of the existing problems that exist in Eastern Ladakh and many other places across it, and devise out methodologies for patrolling. See, as General Pannu pointed out, we had so many agreements previously signed, and so many discussions have taken place. The JWG started in early 80s before it finished off when the SR started. And SR mechanism has been going on separately. So many talks going on. Let's resolve what we are doing. How far can you plan today, Staff College? We can plan only to see this. De-escalation, which means going back to the cantonments in Taklamakan Desert, or going to Urumqi or to Kasgar, back across the Kundlon range. Now, see, Kundun Range crossing takes from Taklamakan Desert, which is low altitude area, to cross a super altitude of 18,000 feet and come down to the gorge which is formed by the Yarkand River and the area between Karakoram Range and the Kundun Range is actually icy and frozen. For them, induction from there is as difficult as induction for us to coming from plains. So, if they de-induct, it is as tough for them to induct back here. Those are long drawn propositions, and I don't think they are on the table for discussion today. Next round will actually try to resolve it as to how the patrolling be carried out. My anxiety comes on the word agreement used by us often in the course of
Yeah.
last time. And the Chinese not using the word agreement, the Chinese use the word of resolution. So my anxiety comes is that we should not go rush into signing one more of these 1996 and 2005 and 2013 agreements, because these agreements bind our own soldiers and units which are deployed on the border to discharge the responsibility well. Jal Shankar.
Yeah, thanks a lot, sir. Thanks a lot for that. And I think you clarified a lot of issues in this. The main issue which I want to tell anyone who's listening is de-escalation is still over the horizon at this point of time, far away, right? Because I don't see that happening. All we can see is how to disengage and get to a modicum of understanding as to how to behave on the LAC, not even an agreement. So we'll have to work in this nebulous zone for quite some time to come. Right. Jan Dushyant sir, please tell me about this Bhutanese territory. See, Bhutanese infringement of China into Bhutan is not limited to Dolam or Doklam as we now largely understand. It is also Pasarlung and Jakarlung in the north. They also laid claim to Shakteng, which has got no connectivity with the border, which is 100 plus kilometers of pure jungle terrain. But it sits right at the base of Tawang, or rather, near that place called Nikmadon. So, give me your views on that and how do we handle this situation? Yeah, you're muted. You're muted. I think you have to get back.
As far as Bhutan is concerned, it's a very complex problem for India, and the problem becomes more complex because of our high moral ground which we occupy. We consider Bhutan as a sovereign country, and obviously it is a sovereign country. But the way the area of Dolam is laid out, or the way it has been made to lay out, because the tri junction, there is a disparity in defining the tri-junction. We define tri-junction further north at Batangla, and they define it at further south in the area of the tri-junction, which is meeting the Jampheri Ridge. So, if you take the Chinese tri-junction, then Jampheri Ridge becomes part of the Chinese, and if you take the Batangla area as the tri-junction, then Jampheri Ridge is with Bhutan. So there is this major problem there, and because of this problem we have a lot of strategic issues which we can't ignore, and obviously it is known to everyone. But I must also point out here that the Chinese have started playing a different game. Now they are approaching the Bhutanese directly as far as the Bhutan China boundary issue is concerned. Somewhere we can see a long term plan of the Chinese to possibly take out one more issue of boundary out of the loop of their 14 boundary dispute agreements which they have already done with the other countries, and that leaves only India to be needled from time to time as part of their overall strategic game. And the Bhutanese also seem to be somehow coming around to the Chinese view, and obviously because of the fact that the Chinese do enjoy asymmetry between India and China, there is a obvious asymmetry as far as the force levels are concerned, as far as the military is concerned. Currently, there are some weak spots now coming up in the Chinese army, but that is not a subject of discussion of today. So, therefore, what they have created is this option of swapping, that okay, we will give you the northern area with Jakarlung and Sangla. So
Pasarlung.
so that will be given to the Bhutanese, and you give us the Dolam area, which is absolute no as far as we are concerned. We have a dilemma of, if they do anything in this area, we have to intervene. We cannot actually wait for that B day or whatever day we call it, and wait for somebody to invite us to go inside and then take care of our strategic requirements. I think that is one decision which is at the politico military level, which has to be somewhere kept in mind whenever we are dealing with Bhutan boundary issue. I think if we are clear on this, rest is just a matter of dealing with it whenever it comes through, because Chumbi Valley, for all its advantages which the Chinese get, we also enjoy a tremendous advantage. As far as Chumbi Valley is concerned, we have a number of options to close them down. And we have prepared accordingly for that particular contingency. The problem is only the area of the southern tip, which we call it as the Dolam area, for which we need to have a very clear-cut policy. Whether it is stated, unstated is immaterial. After all, if somebody else is not following an agreement, why should we be tied down to agreements? When it comes to our own sovereignty, as far as our own sovereignty is concerned, we all know how close, how critical those two road and rail links are for us. We just can't let it. We have had a number of exercises actually painting this kind of an, and we are all military men. We know what can actually take place in today's environment with so much of technical superiority, so much of air and other superiorities which which the Chinese enjoy. I think that is an area which we need to be always cognizant of. If there is any area which in this entire eastern sector which we need to be always there with our eyes open and ears open, I think that is this area. So Bhutan boundary issue is something which we need to be very, very careful about. I think that is something we just
thanks
can't
a lot.
ignore.
Okay. Thanks a lot, sir. That was very clear that the sensitivity of the Dolam Plateau is something which we have to never keep out of focus. And we have to understand that Bhutan's territorial integrity, or whatever you call it, is of immense concern to us, and it's a very complex problem, right? And we have to handle it with the best of our capability. And in the past 4 years, if there's a slight shift which has happened, earlier the Chinese were not allowed to deal directly with Bhutan, or they didn't
Yes.
deal directly with Bhutan. They always went, through India, or we didn't allow. For whatever reasons, geopolitical issues, one-to-one issues, whatever we call it, they started dealing with Bhutan one-to-one. And we have to handle this dynamic situation very carefully. I'll leave it at that. I'll ask General Pannu, the question which I have for you is, you made the statement, they'll have peace at will and aggression at will, and they'll do salami slicing. I completely agree with you. And they're going to be there at our sensitive places, and that's where they'll exert the salami slicing principle. Is it time for us to also start thinking like that? Or at least thinking and conveying it across to them that, in the same coin?
I think as military people, we are always very bold and very straight and direct. We always want capacities to be built which support our statements. Sometimes, the statements are made, but we don't support these statements. Some loose statements get communicated, and we have sometimes not planned like that. During some discussion on Article 370, it is basically media which creates a problem. That would you take the excision? And if the answer is yes, then let's take excision. We have to be very clear that is our international border the border, or are we not considering the international border as border, and are we looking at some other line which we want the LAC should be settled, or we want international border to be settled? I think we need to know ourselves what we want. Second thing is that when we are talking about the McMahon line, the Chinese respect McMahon line, I think Chinese never ratified it. Second thing is they have repeatedly claimed 90,000 square kilometers of Arunachal Pradesh. Anytime the Prime Minister, Defense Minister, or any important person goes to Arunachal Pradesh, they always uh, cry and have objections to it. So it is not how the military does its patrolling or aggression. I think how as nation we communicate is first thing which is very important. I think we need to be very certain what we want. If we want to go and take over the entire excitation, or are we going to have a package deal where there is a swap deal which has been spoken many times between Tawang and excitation, that you keep excitation and we keep Tawang, and the matter of 90,000 square kilometers vis-a-vis the excitation gets settled and all that. Even if we go for offensive, when we're talking about the Mountain Strike Corps and all that, how deep can you go? So I think what is important is who wants more peace. Does India need more peace or does China need more peace? I think in this particular setting, both need peace. But I think the signaling is very different. That how we are signaling is that we are peace lovers. We want to do everything the way the agreements, as General Sharma says, we want to adhere to the agreements. And the soldiers find it very difficult to adhere to these agreements. I think we need to signal it that at will, we will do how it suits us. For example, when we went into the Kailash range during the entire Galwan conflict, I think that was the right thing to do. That we didn't have to look at lines and agreements. We just did it because it helped us tactically. It helped us to gain certain areas, which I mean, in the civilian parlance, obviously people don't understand what is QPQ. But the point is that we need to have these leverages, which are military leverages, but not announce them, execute them. Only once we execute them, we would know that we are on the right foot, but the Chinese would always want to wrong foot us. I think we need to talk less and prepare and execute more.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for that. We need to talk less and prepare more. And we should do what suits us. And to do what suits us and what we need capability. Unless you have capability, we will not be able to do what suits us. So we have to have, if you have that capability, first and foremost, you have to build that capability and then you have to plan with that capability so that you do what you want. And the next thing is, which I think is a very important thing, is what do we want? We want the LAC or the IB? And what is it that you want politically is something which we have to be very clear of. I don't know whether we have the political strength to give up Aksai and do a swap deal anymore. I think politically that is well out of the game at this point of time. So will leave it at that. I'll not get into that part of it. We have a LAC, and we have discussed as to how we're going to handle most of the issues there. We brought out the sensitive aspects today, right? There are a lot of gray areas left on the LAC, despite this resolution, deal, agreement, whatever you call it, understanding with the Chinese, buffer zones, disengagement, de-escalation. All these are fancy words, but actually what happens on ground is something which we have to see, right? Ultimately, the proof of the pudding is eating. Till our man goes to the TP-15 or goes to Chardingla or, is able to hang on to Jamferi Ridge, nothing matters. The rest is all, imaginary lines on ground. So this is what it is. I thought we put across our issues, the military aspects of this whole story well today. It's not a matter of one having a point of view or giving another point of view. It is all our collective point of view which says, look, these are the issues which are at stake. If these are the issues that are at stake, I don't see trade happening in a hurry, right? And that's what we need to realize. That's all I had to say. It was a great discussion. I would like to thank all the panelists for their views. General Moorthy sir, over to you. Please wrap it up and then we'll say Jai Hind.
Thank you very much, General Shankar. Thank you, my fellow panelists, who all three of you have got tremendous hands-on experience in actually countering the Chinese. And as I said, I defer to your experience. It was wonderful hearing you, and I think all of us stand educated listening to your views on the various military aspects that are that we ought to be cognizant of as going forward uh, with this understanding, as General Shankar brought out very clearly. It is an understanding that's been arrived at. No legal agreement has been signed. I'd like to emphasize that. So an understanding is what it is, an understanding based on trust or verify, distrust or verify, whichever way you see it. But I, still being an incurable optimist, would look to saying, let us trust and verify uh, step by step, step by step. It has to move step by step. Thank you all very much. Thank you, viewers, for your patience. Thank you, and Jai Hind to all.
Jai.
Jai Hind, before we this thing, I'd like to tell all our viewers, I'm not taking questions because I've seen your questions, and we're not going to answer it. I'll answer it in the